All right, I will call the Senate Judiciary to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Harris, Senator Orenshaw, Senator Dondero Loop, Senator Wynne, Senator Hansen, Senator Krasner, Senator Stone, Chair Scheibel.
Here, thank you. Please mark those senators present who are not present when they arrive. We just have two bills on for hearing today. My plan is to take them in order unless anybody gives me a signal that there's a reason to do it the reverse. Not seeing anybody, we will go ahead and open up the hearing on AB 14. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Stavros Anthony, Lieutenant Governor for Nevada. I'm here to testify in support of Assembly Bill 14. My predecessor, Lieutenant Governor Lisa Cano Burke, had requested a bill to help ease the burden on small businesses, and I'm pleased to help advance this legislation through this session. As many of you are aware, my office oversees the Office of Small Business Advocacy. This office has talked with many small businesses who have expressed the need to make licensing process less confusing and less burdensome. If passed, AB 14 will create a business license working group. For the next 2 years, this working group will study and make recommendations to facilitate an easier startup process for businesses, especially small businesses. I'll be working with Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar on this legislation. We both share a desire to help small businesses in Nevada succeed. As outlined in the legislation, the Secretary of State will chair the group, and I will be the vice chair. The working group will include many of the stakeholders involved in business licensing. It will have members representing local governments, large and small, as well as chambers of commerce and business interests. As a working group, our goal will be to streamline this process for business owners by making a one-stop shop at the Secretary of State's office. A prosperous business community is critical to the success of our state, and I appreciate the committee hearing this bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Gabriel DeCara. I'm the Chief Deputy Secretary of State, and I am here on behalf of Secretary of State Francisco Aguilar. The Secretary has started businesses and helped others who are starting their business for much of his career, so he has a firm understanding of the difficulties involved. And since taking office, he's made it a priority to do whatever he can to simplify processes for Nevada's small and micro business owners. Silverflume, the state business portal, was originally conceived to be a one-stop shop, the kind of portal that this legislation was originally aimed at creating. But in the decade plus since the system came online, there have been any number of technical and logistical barriers that prevented this from coming to fruition. The Secretary, alongside the Lieutenant Governor, believes that these barriers need to be crossed sooner than later. Thanks to the representatives for the cities and counties, as well as chambers of commerce and other business organizations being willing to come to the table, we believe that we can begin laying the framework for what this one-stop shop will look like and gather all necessary requirements for its eventual implementation. There are a lot of questions to answer, and I'm sure more will come up along the way, but we're confident that these conversations will bring us closer to our goal of making Nevada the most convenient and accessible state in the nation to start your business. So again, we'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor for bringing this bill, Assemblywoman Saber Newby for facilitating the amendment to it, and everyone from the cities and counties and other organizations for working together on a solution. Thank you very much.
All right, questions from members of the committee. Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. No, that was like a great idea. Didn't we have something similar not that long ago? Is that where the whole idea of the silver flume came into being, or is this a brand new concept?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, through you to Senator Hansen. Yes, I believe that was the original intention of Silver Flume, was to create a single statewide one-stop shop for all licensing. But I'm sure, again, folks from the cities and counties could tell you, it's a little bit more complicated than just us, the Secretary of State's office, collecting the money and then sending them a check. There's a lot of steps along the way to start any number of the businesses in Nevada. So.
Okay, well, there's one other question I have, and that is the State Controller's Office. Is that part of the working group at all? The reason I bring that up is I know that there's an interesting, I don't know if I'm phrasing it right, but basically you get your license from one, you get a voucher from a different state agency, and then you get your payment from a different one, a third one, and through the State Controller's Office. And I had an individual reach out to me. Is there some way to streamline that process? So this does not include currently the Controller's Office, but I know that when we're talking about streamlining the process, there's both the licensing side of it, and then for people to actually do business with the state, the collection, or you get paid portion of it is kind of convoluted too, and you end up going through several different branches of government to try to get all these things arranged for a small business doing business with the state. So I don't know, I don't want to get off on a tangent about that, but I did have some people reach out to me to try to get that concept streamlined. So it sounds like this is what this working group would be working towards. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So the bill does outline gives an idea of who's going to be on the committee. The controller is not in there, but as the vice chair and the chair, I think what's going to end up happening is we'll have the official working group, but we're going to be bringing in people to kind of expert witnesses. So that's a great idea. We'll have the controller come in and we'll get some of his ideas, and we'll bring some other people in. And this is going to be a serious group. We're going to be bringing some folks in to give us some advice, give us their opinion. So we will make sure we do that.
Good. Piece of advice is keep this group as small as possible to actually get something accomplished. You get, 5, 7 members on a thing, you'll get something done. You get 25 people, you're spinning your wheels and you'll never get anything accomplished. So just a little observation from dealing with the bureaucracies and even the legislature. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions from members of the committee? So, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and you may or may not know that our House and our committee here in the Judiciary want to approve additional working groups, task forces, commissions, committees, etc., because they do often become unwieldy and turn into kind of a consolation prize for people who can't get their bills passed. And so I want to make sure I'm understanding the problem that we're trying to solve here is that I, Melanie Scheibel, want to open up a business selling Melanie Scheibel's widgets, and the issue is that when I go to register, incorporate, license my business, there's kind of a maze of local, county, and state level agencies where I need to get permitted and licensed. And the problem we're trying to solve is to cut back the red tape and make it easier for individuals to open up a small business in Nevada. Am I right?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. That's correct. It is. It's not even just as simple as because, on our website, on the website for the Department of Business and Industry, there are links, there are ways that we tell people where to go, but that process can be difficult for someone navigating. Even figuring out what exactly licenses you need and everything you need can be tough, even if you already have your state business license and you're just trying to figure it out with your county, your city, whatever your municipality is. So the goal here would be to have, through a single portal at the Secretary of State's site, be able to accomplish all of that licensure, to pay all of your fees, which the Secretary of State's office would then distribute to each of the jurisdictions appropriately, so that you're not having to visit multiple offices, go to multiple websites, that it all happens through a single portal. And the reason why, and I absolutely understand your position and the position of this committee and other committees, but that is a difficult process to legislate because it comes this portal would come into contact with not just whatever the NRS is, but also whatever rules and regulations that each of the cities and counties have. And so figuring out how to navigate all of that without a sort of legislatively mandated group would probably be pretty difficult. We want to make sure that we have the right people at the table having the conversation about how we get here. And so that was why this decision was made.
Okay. Next, I'm going to make what's more of a suggestion than a question, because as I'm reading the bill, and you don't have to respond today or right now, as I'm reading the bill, it looks like there's nothing required here that couldn't already be done without statute. There's nothing that prevents the Secretary of State from sitting down with members of the Nevada League of Cities, someone from a city with a population less than 100,000, someone from a city with a population between 100,000 and 500,000. There's nothing that stops the Secretary of State currently from convening a working group to get all of these people in one room to talk about the problem that we're trying to address and a way to solve it. It also sounds like you've already kind of identified the ultimate goal of the solution, which is to create this portal. Now, I understand that getting from point A to point B, where we are today, to point B, where there's a portal, requires some input of information. But I personally would like to see a bill that had some more goalposts in mind, like what would the Secretary of State need from each county in order to build this portal? Is the problem that the Secretary of State doesn't have a list from every county of the type of licenses that they offer? Is the problem that the Secretary of State doesn't know how much each of those licenses costs? So I would rather see, instead of a working group where we're going to talk about the problem a little bit more and think about it a little bit more and talk a little bit more and discuss it and work on it and think about it and talk about it, would be a bill where we have a goal that says, you know, all the municipalities, all of the counties are going to provide this information to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is going to provide this information to the counties so that in 2025 or 2027 or whatever the goal is, we know what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to create a portal that is currently, I'm thinking, not authorized by law because we don't have the mechanism in place for people to pay the state and the state to pay those fees back to the municipalities and counties. And I guess that's also, that part is a question. Does the Secretary of State currently have that power, or are you missing the legal authority to do that?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I do not know the answer, but I will find out for you.
All right, thank you. And I don't want this to be misconstrued to suggest that I don't want to help small business and I don't want to get this portal off the ground. I just want to make sure that we're not spinning our wheels in the interim. Are there any other questions? All right, I don't see any other questions, so we'll move to testimony in support of AB 14, starting with people present in Carson City or Las Vegas.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good to see you. For the record, Trey Abney, representing the 2,000 member businesses of NFIB in Nevada, the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Average employee count of our members about 4 to 8 employees, so certainly the smallest of the small. We support this effort, obviously, you know, with my own small business having to go to the Secretary of State and then the city and then the county for a fictitious name and then DETR and then Department of Tax. It can be a laborious process for somebody that doesn't know how to navigate all of those different departments. So certainly anything that helps bring everybody and all those pieces together in one room and figure out a solution, we would support. Now, Madam Chair, to your point, if this bill doesn't pass, or if there's a better way to do this, you know, right now, we would obviously support that as well. We would support any effort to get everybody to the table, bill or not. So thank you, Madam Chair, for your time.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. For the record, Dylan Keith, DYLAN-KEITH with the Vegas Chamber. We'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor for bringing this bill forward. We do believe it is important that we are making sure, while the Secretary of State's office is developing the updated and redeveloped Silver Flume, that we are taking into account businesses' voices and quite a few of the different interests to make sure that that process is truly the one-stop shop that we are trying to develop for these businesses. So we kindly ask for your support, and thank you for your time.
Winnie Dowling with the Nevada Small Business Development Center. I'm the state director. I'm here to support AB 14. We have 12 offices around the state. We've been here since 1985. And all businesses have to interact in Silver Flume in the portal. So about 43% of our clients are startups, and they have lots of questions. They're confused about which licenses they have to pay, which taxes. They don't know in what order, and then sometimes they have troubles. They need help maybe in Spanish, so we provide that assistance. And then once you're in business, you also have questions because you have to re-up your license, you have maybe amendments to do, you need to change your resident agent, something like that. So you have lots of questions along the way. And so we are very thrilled to be part of this working group. This is, we're being brought to the table, and so we have lots of input for you. Questions, issues, concerns, but I think mostly we just want to make the process a lot easier for businesses and for it to be a positive experience for them. So in summary, we support AB 14.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel. My name is Vincent Guthrow. I serve as the Executive Director of the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. My last name is spelled G-U-T-H-R-E-A-U. NACO is mentioned in Section 5 of this bill, and we are in support of AB 14 in its current form. I want to thank our specific members, Carson City and Clark County, for their work with the sponsors, and also want to thank the sponsors for engaging with counties and for including them on this working group. And that was all I had to say in support. Again, thank you for your time. Look forward to the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Jeff Rogan from Clark County. We worked very hard with the Lieutenant Governor's office as well as with the Secretary of State's office to conceptualize what it means to integrate between the state, counties, and cities. And it's a very difficult conversation because a lot of counties do things differently than other counties, and cities do things differently than other cities. So we thought that the best way forward was actually to take the time over the interim to figure out, what does this look like? How is this going to work? We couldn't do it during the legislative session, and that's why we actually need this. We anticipate this to be a very productive working group and taking input from large counties, large cities, small counties, small cities, to make sure that the process actually works for the businesses within our community. So I urge your support of AB 14. And I can't say enough to thank also Assemblywoman Saber Newby for helping us get together to work on this final product. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, representing the city of Henderson. My colleague from Clark County said it best. This is going to be a good way for all cities and counties to come to the table, talk about our experiences in licensing. But the one thing I wanted to mention above and beyond that is having the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor at the table with us is going to be very beneficial. And it kind of goes to Senator Hansen's question of that horizontal integration across the state agencies. We see that at the local level quite often when businesses come in person or they call us. A lot of the questions we're answering are things that they need to do at the state level before they can get their local licensing process started. So having that horizontal integration as well as the vertical integration down to the cities and counties, I think will make things much easier for the business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. We very much support this effort that's included within AB 14. And Madam Chair, I think you make a good point. Why would we need to do this statutorily? There's a lot of turf to be covered. There's a lot of personalities. There's a lot of reasons why efforts like this have failed in the past. And sometimes you need a statute to say, all of you are going to get into a room. Let's figure this out. It's for the benefit of the small business, medium business, large businesses in our state to have one place where we can do this efficiently, and yet everybody gets what it is that they know that they deserve, whether it be money, turf, or whatever. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, for the record, my name is Terry Graves, representing the Nevada Trucking Association and Nevada Manufacturing Association, representing some 500 plus members, many of whom are small business or owner-operators. We applaud the intent of this bill and hopefully ultimately results in a more efficient, time-saving operation for customers of these government services. And I will conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Isaac Hardy representing the Urban Consortium, which is made up of Reno, Sparks, Henderson, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. I will keep it brief. We just want to echo the comments you've heard here today, and we are in support. Thank you.
All right, I don't see anybody else coming up to give support testimony in Carson City. Doesn't look like anybody in Las Vegas to give support testimony either, so we'll go to the phones for support of AB 14.
Thank you, Chair. If you'd like to testify in support of AB 14, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We have no callers in the queue at this time, Chair.
All right, then we will go to testimony in opposition to AB 14. I'm not seeing anybody coming up to give testimony in Carson City or Las Vegas, so we'll go to the phones for our testimony in opposition to AB 14.
We have no callers in the queue for opposition.
All right, then we will go to neutral testimony on AB 14. Not seeing anybody coming to the front in Las Vegas or Carson City. We'll go to the phones for neutral testimony on AB 14.
We have no callers in the queue for neutral.
All right, unless the sponsors have any closing remarks, that will conclude the hearing on AB 14. All right, I will now close the hearing on AB 14 and open the hearing on AB 32. Come on up whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Victoria Gonzalez. I am the Executive Director of the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy. I'm excited to come before you with another data-driven bill for our criminal justice system. I have included quite a bit of data in our slideshow presentation. I won't go over all of it so that we can focus on what's important for you. So the outline of my presentation will be, I'm going to identify the purpose and the goals of AB 32, provide some background information for sections 4 and 7 and 5 and 8, which are the data-driven portions of the bill, and then share the data that supports the bill, and then I will walk through it. So the purpose and goals of AB 32 is our agency and the Sentencing Commission are here to help lawmakers and stakeholders advance data-driven recommendations for our criminal justice system, and that is what this bill does. It will improve implementation of a specific AB 236 policy as it was enacted back in 2019. And then the other sections of the bill are intended to improve sustainability of both our agency and the Sentencing Commission. I have on this slide a breakdown of the difference between parole and probation, just for your reference. I can go through it in detail if the chair or the members of the committee prefer, but at least you have this here as a reference. The thing I will highlight is you see a lot of sections in the bill are duplicative because probation is covered in Chapter 176A of NRS, and parole is addressed in Chapter 213 of NRS. And so we have to think about those sections separately and how each of those procedures is handled. So just so you know, when you're navigating the bill, if you're wondering if you're in parole and probation, it's going to be most helpful to look at what chapter you're in. So one of the things I want to cover quickly is supervision violations and consequences. So what does it mean to be on supervision? So both parole and probation are types of supervision depending on where you're at in the criminal justice system. So you can violate, when you're on supervision, it is possible to violate supervision. There's different ways to do that. Those violations can be through technical violations. You can commit a new offense while you're on supervision, or you can abscond. Those are the ways that supervision can be violated. So the consequences for violating supervision are a temporary revocation for a technical violation, and what's used is a matrix of graduated sanctions to address those technical violations. If a new offense is committed, you can serve a penalty for the new charges and or be revoked from your supervision. And then if there's a finding that you've absconded, then the penalty or the consequence is a revocation. So in AB 236, there were specific provisions to implement swift, certain, and proportional sanctions. And so what those sections of AB 236 did was establish a statutory definition of technical violation, which did not previously exist. And so as you can note in the bill, 176A510 is for probationers and 213.15101 is for parolees. So what that definition does, it's a negative, and so it can be a little tricky to read, but it exempts what is not a technical violation. So anything you don't see listed there is a technical violation for supervision. So the response to technical violations that was created by AB 236 was this matrix of graduated sanctions and tasked the Division of Parole and Probation to design a matrix to respond to those technical violations. And you can see these sections that apply to both probationers and parolees. So here's how temporary revocations work for violations of technical violations. So for the first finding of technical violations, it's a temporary revocation of 30 days. Then it goes 90 days for a second, 180 days for a third, and a full revocation for a fourth or subsequent technical violation of supervision. What I have on this slide is an illustration of how that process would work. So I'll just go through the first few phases. So someone is put on supervision, whether it's parole or probation, and the Division of Parole and Probation uses graduated sanctions to respond to any technical violation. If there are enough technical violations that Division of Parole and Probation decides seeking a temporary revocation is appropriate, then they will seek that first temporary revocation. There's a process in place, and then the parolee or probationer could face up to 30 days for that temporary revocation. And then as I listed on the previous slide, it escalates each time that parolee or probationer has continued to have technical violations while they're on supervision. So you can see if they were to go through the process again, they serve that time, they're released on supervision, they have more technical violations, and so there we work through a second, third, and if they get up to the last one, it would then be a fourth or subsequent, or a revocation for that fourth. So where it gets complicated is for parolees. So what I have on this slide is the process that a parolee would face if they were looking at technical violations for supervision. I do have noted here that probationers do not go through this same process. It's a little more direct. So what happens first is a parolee could be facing an alleged technical violation. Then the parolee is arrested by the Division of Parole and Probation and placed in custody in a jail. PNP then holds a probable cause inquiry within 15 days of the arrest. PNP submits a report or retake warrant to the parole board based on the outcome of that probable cause inquiry. So if a probable cause has been found that an alleged violation of a technical violation has occurred, then they submit the retake warrant to the parole board. If the parole board reviews the report and decides the retake warrant is appropriate here and a hearing must be held to determine whether technical violations have occurred, then they will sign the retake warrant. The retake warrant is then sent back to PNP where the parolee is sitting in jail waiting. After that retake warrant has been sent over, the parolee is then transferred to the Department of Corrections, where a parolee must be transferred while they're waiting for a parole hearing, or for the hearing to determine whether or not they violated their supervision. DOC houses the parolees. They have to process them at intake just like any other person being processed for admission to the Department of Corrections. The parole board is then required to hold the revocation hearing within 60 days of being admitted to DOC. And then at that hearing, the parole board makes a finding about the technical violations and then orders time to be served for based on the 30, 90, 180 days for those technical violations. Once the parolee has served that time, then they have to be released just as another offender would be from the Department of Corrections. So several months after AB 236 went into effect, several criminal justice agencies brought to my attention concerns about the implementation of this process, specifically for parolees. And so I worked with them to learn more about the process. Obviously, I've learned a lot about how this works. And then realized we need to collect data to understand what's actually happening. Once I understood how long a parolee has to sit in jail, then be processed at DOC, and then wait for a hearing. And so our initial data collection was for temporary revocations imposed from July 2020, which is when AB 236 went into effect, to February 2022. This first data set was very limited in the elements we collected. These were our initial findings, and we did present these to the Sentencing Commission. So as you can see, we found that there was up to 30 days in jail waiting for that probable cause inquiry and for that transfer to the Department of Corrections. And then once the parolee had been transferred to the Department Department of Corrections, it was an average of 45 days between the readmission and the actual hearing. And then the majority of those who served who were ordered to serve a 30-day temporary revocation, served more than 30 days in DOC. And that's not including any time they would have sat waiting in jail. So since our initial data collection, we've expanded the scope of our data we collected and analyzed. The data presented on the next several slides is based on July 1, 2020 through January 31st, 2023. Here you can see how many of these temporary revocations have been imposed. I will note that if the number of 30-day revocations in January persists through 2023, we could have the same number of violations as we had in 2022. We just continued to break down the data, so you can see that we got a lot of questions in the presentation on the assembly side, and so we just provided additional analysis of the data, so you can see this broken down based on the offense group and by the number of days that they were actually serving. And so I'll leave those for you to review and can answer any questions about those. So the number one question is, what problem are we trying to solve? So our data showed that parolees are spending more than 30 days incarcerated for that first temporary revocation, and more than by a lot, right? So if the average was 45 days just waiting in DOC and then serving the 30 days for the temporary revocation and then not including that jail time, it's quite a bit of time. You're almost pushing that the next level where we'd be looking at 90 days. So if the intent of AB 236 for this provision was to advance policies that are swift, certain, and proportional sanctions, our data findings show that's not what's happening. And so we also found that the impacts to DOC to effectively process parolees is a burden, because DOC is not built to process short stays. The infrastructure is in place to process longer lengths of stay, and so having to process these parolees quickly in and out results in a lot, and you can see a delay in the parolees being able to get back out on supervision. And then if the intent is for these temporary revocations to provide people additional opportunities to be successful on supervision, they are not able to get that, because the length of time that they could be spending waiting for their hearing could result in the loss of their job, housing, or other support that might promote their success while on supervision. So the solution that we came up with was actually based on what we found in other states as well. And so it's to create an intermediate sanction for both probation and parole. So this would happen before the temporary revocation. The graduated sanctions would still be applied, but this intermediate sanction would be an additional opportunity to provide somebody a check-in or a sanction for what's happening on supervision. So what the bill does is it authorizes the Division of Parole and Probation to impose jail sanctions of 1 to 10 days at a time in the aggregate of 30 days, or electronic monitoring in response to a technical violation. And so, and then the next step would be to remove the 30-day temporary revocation only for parolees, as it looks like they're not even serving that 30 days, and it's impossible for them to actually serve that time and get the swift, certain, proportional sanctions. So by removing this, it provides that intermediate sanction, it provides the intermediate sanction and removes the 30-day temporary revocation. Based on our discussions with criminal justice stakeholders on the assembly side, we decided to leave the 30 days for the probationers, as it provides just another level and opportunity to be successful while on supervision. I will note, included in your materials is a report that summarizes the journey that we had in researching and vetting this issue, including taking it before the Sentencing Commission. That report also includes issues that were brought up. While the Sentencing Commission did approve the recommendation for this BDR to be submitted, with the idea, obviously it's evolved since then, we wanted to make sure we noted all the issues that were brought up in the research and vetting of this issue. I created this table here on this slide to help you navigate the bill. So then just going through the bill generally, so section 1, or now the section 1. I did not update this. 1.7 revises the duties of the executive director. So this is to ensure that the purpose of this and our goal is to ensure the commission can set qualifications appropriate to run the agency. Section 2 revises membership and certain appointing authorities for the Sentencing Commission, so just empowers the authorities to appoint the appropriate person to the commission. 3 and 6 revise the type of risk assessment used for sex offenders. This was discussed in the Sentencing Commission, and what was clarified was that different risk assessments are needed for sex offenders, and so the language here just makes sure that the Division of Parole and Probation can use the risk assessment that's appropriate for sex offenders. And make sure that's still consistent with it being evidence-based. Sections 4 and 7 authorize the Division of Parole and Probation to use those intermediate sanctions as I described them, the jail and electronic monitoring, as part of the graduated sanctions. 4 and 7 also revises the definition of technical violation to exempt certain conditions for sex offenders. So in our work with Division of Parole and Probation, what was happening is all conditions for sex offenders are considered technical violations because of the way the definition is written. And so what we worked through with the division and through amendments on the assembly side was working out which of those conditions are consistent with the policy that they should be technical versus those that are not technical. So in your materials is a table that explains which each of those conditions are and which ones would be technical versus which ones are not technical. Section 8 removes that 30-day temporary revocation for parolees only. We're leaving that for the probationers, as I explained. And then one of the things that came out in our development of the bill on the other side as well was to make sure that credit is applied for those probationers and parolees waiting for their hearings, so that you get that time served and you can get back out on supervision to continue to work towards your success and advance those swift, certain, and proportional sanctions. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Are there questions from members of the committee? I just wanted to clarify what you described as an intermediate sanction between the graduated sanctions and the temporary revocation. So I think I understand better how it would apply to parole, because my understanding right now is currently parole does not have the statutory power to sentence somebody to any length of time in jail or detention. They only have the ability to send them to prison on their underlying sentence. Is that correct?
Correct. Victoria Gonzalez, for the record, if a parolee has been alleged to violate parole, they have to be sent to the Department of Corrections to wait a hearing from the parole board, and that's provided for in statute.
And so it seems like this is almost creating a way for that person to stay instead in the local detention center and serve a shorter period of time and be released after the end of that time period.
Victoria Gonzalez, for the record, that's correct.
Okay. So all this makes sense to me for people who are on parole. I'm a little bit confused how it applies in the probation setting, because somebody on probation is going to be awaiting their hearing in front of a district court judge in jail anyway. So let me just try for a second and see if I'm understanding correct. Is the idea that as a probation officer, I can make a choice? Somebody has a technical violation. I can either say, we're going to send you to jail for 10 days, come back out, you'll still be on probation, or we're going to seek a temporary 30-day revocation, which means you go to jail for an unspecified number of days until you can get that hearing.
Victoria Gonzalez, for the record. So the intermediate sanction must come first. So the Division of Parole and Probation has their matrix of graduated sanctions, and they have put together a draft version of that. And so the idea would be to exhaust, well, the statute provides that the graduated sanctions must be exhausted before seeking a temporary revocation. The jail time, the 1 to 10 days, and the electronic monitoring is now part of the graduated sanctions. So the graduated sanctions must be exhausted before seeking a temporary revocation of that 30 days. And yeah.
And so what are the graduated sanctions currently that have to be exhausted?
What are they? I could run through an example of them. I can also provide a table to the committee that would help you see. It's based on risk level, and just 1 second, let me pull that up.
My question is, are the current graduated sanctions things like loss of privileges, monetary fines, drug testing? What kinds of graduated sanctions are currently in place?
Thank you, Chair. So Victoria Gonzalez, for the record. So the graduated sanctions are based on risk level and then violation severity. So let's just say you have somebody with a low risk level and a low violation severity. So then those responses in the matrix would be a verbal or written warning, a curfew imposed, maybe a loss of certain privilege, an incident report. And then let's just say we jump down to someone who's a high risk level but has a less severe violation. So very similar, right? So they would have increased treatment. They could also get a verbal or written warning. And so, for example, for that person that I just mentioned, in the draft that PNP started to work on, for someone who's a high risk level and a less severe violation, they might be facing now electronic monitoring or a flash incarceration of up to 2 days. So that's the proposal right now. So it would be used in pieces like that in the graduated sanctions based on what's your risk level and how severe was your violation.
So here's my concern that we crafted that language very carefully in 2019 with AB 236 to ensure that there is, like you said, that flash incarceration for 2 days, but anything longer than that, you would be entitled to a hearing. And so now it sounds like we're going to give parole and probation the authority to incarcerate somebody for a period of 10 days without a hearing.
Victoria Gonzalez for the record. So the piece that I just proposed about the 2 days is not in AB 236. What happens right now if someone's violated supervision, they would be arrested and go right to the hearing. And then what they'd be facing is 30 days. And so you're correct. With this intermediate sanction, now what we're looking at is 1 to 10 days that they'd be facing as a sanction. And by agreeing to participate specifically for probationers, they're going to have to, when they sign their agreement, they're going to agree to be subject to the flash incarcerations of the 1 to 10 days based on what is provided in the matrix. And what that would provide for is an opportunity for them to serve less time quickly rather than having to sit in a hearing and face more time for violations.
Okay. Other questions from members of the committee? Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First of all, another excellent presentation. You did that last one, and I love data fields. Got real answers there, not just speculations. Question though, I don't see, is there anybody from the Department of Corrections here, and do you know if are they on board with this program? It sounds like they would like it, but I don't see anybody out there. So I don't know if it's proper for you to make an answer on their behalf, because I don't think anybody is here from DOC, but anyway, your thoughts on that?
Victoria Gonzalez for the record. I will answer for that. We worked very closely with the Department of Corrections on this. So it was the Department of Corrections that actually came to me first with this issue, and then we reached out to the Division of Parole and Probation and then the Parole Board and brought in all the stakeholders. And we met every month or so during the interim to develop these ideas and explore them. And I do believe I can't remember if they were at the hearing last time. And so I'm going to take this as their trust in me to handle and testify about this issue and represent the work that we've done together. And I can already I can almost promise the testimony and support you're going to hear is across the criminal justice stakeholders. We've worked really hard to get everybody's input and implement what is the important policy and the best effort for everyone on this. So yeah, so as far as the Department of Corrections is concerned, they are on board with this, and this came from our work with them and the Division of Parole and Probation and the Parole Board.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I don't see any further questions, so we will move to testimony in support of AB 32. Anybody wishing to give support testimony is invited to the tables in front in Carson City or Las Vegas. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Erica Roth, ERICAROTH, on behalf of the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. We initially testified in opposition to this bill, but we want to thank the executive director for working very closely with all of the stakeholders and hearing our concerns. And just, Chair, to answer your question, what's currently happening as far as flash incarcerations on the probation level is that clients are often spending at least 15 days waiting for a hearing. And a lot can happen in that time. They can lose their job, they can lose their housing. Sometimes that hearing has to be extended out for reasons with the court, and there's litigation around that. And I think this will be able to cut down on that wait time if there's a mechanism to do a weekend to correct a problem instead of having them wait in custody for that entire time. And so we appreciate the executive director for working with us. And I'll just know it looks like there's a district attorney up here too, so I think that means you have to pass the bill.
Thank you, Chair. John Pirro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. We are in support. We do want to thank Director Gonzalez for hearing our concerns, working through the issues with the bill with us, and then for continuing to do good work at the Sentencing Commission. It's putting the state definitely on a better track than we've been on in a long time.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Adam Cate, CATE, on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. I did not know that I wielded that kind of power. It hasn't really been my experience. But nonetheless, we are in support of the bill. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the committee. Jason Walker, Washington County Sheriff's Office. Obviously, the jails are an integral portion of this, and we did work with Director Gonzalez and testify in support. AB 32.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the Judiciary. My name is Beth Schmidt, SCHMIDT. I represent the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We support AB 32. We are extremely grateful to the Executive Director, Victoria Gonzalez, for bringing everyone to the table. You know, jails are impacted by P&P technical violations, and because of this, we do support the implementation of AB 32. This bill would enhance data-based policy decisions moving forward.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, members of the committee. Greg Herrera for the record, Herrera, representing Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association. We're also in support of AB 32, and I'd like to thank Executive Director Gonzalez for outstanding work on this, including us in discussions. Thank you.
All right, I don't see anybody else in Las Vegas or Carson City to give in-person support testimony on AB 32, so we'll go to the phones, please, for support testimony.
Chair, we have no callers in support.
All right, then we'll go to testimony in opposition to AB 32. Anybody wishing to give in-person testimony, now is the time, but I don't see anybody coming to the tables, so we will go to the phones for opposition testimony on AB 32.
Chair, we have no callers in opposition.
All right, then we'll go to neutral testimony on AB 32. Anybody wishing to give neutral testimony in person is invited to the tables, but I don't see anybody, so we'll go to the phones for neutral testimony on AB 32.
Chair, we have no callers testifying in neutral.
All right, thank you. Unless the sponsor has any closing, all right, come on up for closing remarks.
Victoria Gonzalez for the record. Again, I just wanted to thank everybody for all their work on this. I'm really proud of this effort and proud of the work that our criminal justice stakeholders do for our state in maintaining public safety and providing opportunities. And the jail discussion is one that we've wanted to keep in mind from the beginning of this. And so I just want to point out that in section 8.7, one of the things we discussed is we're going to conduct an ongoing analysis of the jails, because our initial analysis right now indicates that there should be a null effect based on how much time those who have alleged violations are serving time in a jail. But by doing this ongoing study over the next interim, we can bring that report back to the legislature and show if there do need to be any adjustments to address the impact of the jail. So I just want to thank everybody again, and thank you, the committee.
Thank you so much. We appreciate all of your hard work. And with that, I will close the hearing on AB 32. That takes us to public comment. Anybody wishing to give public comment in person is invited to do so. It looks like we don't have anybody coming up to do so in person, so we'll go to the phones for public comment.
We have no callers provided with the comment.
All right, then that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting today. We'll be meeting again tomorrow, same time, same place, and until then, we are adjourned.